Mary, just before we go there, just go
Okay.
back to the Curia, because I'm absolutely fascinated with it. I didn't really understand that at the heart of the Catholic Church, there is this sort of command and control network. I don't know how many people work there, but they can more or less do what they like. They have tremendous power. They're shrouded in secrecy. They're totally unaccountable. We know that they treat people in the church appallingly without due process. People like Father Tony Flannery and others, that they just silence them. So why, as Catholics, why do we put up with this Curia? Can we do anything to change it?
Well, we don't have any conduits for getting rid of them, but they're not elected. We are really almost powerless in the face of them, except for one small. Well, I suppose there are a number of things that we can use. What do we wield? Our power of prayer, our power of writing, our power of using the media, our voices, the power of our money. That would certainly bring them to their heels if the money wasn't coming in.
So how would you do that, Mary?
Well, just stop paying.
You mean church collections, is it?
Well, that's difficult because church collections are also directly related to our parish life and our community life and the outreach, the charitable outreach. But I think if we gave our money, and let's say held back a percentage and let our priests know that we're holding back this percentage that we believe, might go to the Curia. Or if we said to our parish priests, this money I'm giving you is exclusively for the use of the parish and the following things, whether it's the schools in the parish. In other words, we don't, or say to them, we don't want a penny of this money to go to the bureaucracy of the church. That might, I don't know, I hadn't really thought about that, but that might or might not work. The Curia, you see, operates, it's a medieval construct. That's the first thing to be said about it. It is a medieval construct that really no longer suits the purposes of a modern church. It's how it employs people. People get jobs there by the old-fashioned way of tapping. And even though nowadays there are a few women in there, not terribly many, but a few, they've also come in there, not by an open process. They don't advertise jobs, and you don't put in an application form, and you don't go through an interview, with an interview panel who have been educated in equal opportunities and have also learnt how to strip away their own baggage and their own the prejudices they might bring to an interview process. I mean, it's still a very medieval process. You are tapped. And so the danger with that, of course, is that then the people who enter that world are of the one mind. They reflect each other. They become an echo chamber. They become a bunker. And the structure of the church is such that it enables them to continue as a bunker.
But it has turned into a huge, big bully. Look at the way they treated you.
Oh, it's very bullying. I'm not the only person. I mean, I'm only a minor character in this. I think of the people, the way in which they treated Sean Fagan, Father Sean Fagan in this country is absolutely outrageous. Now, in fairness, before he died, Francis made some effort to reconcile the church, the curial church, to that lovely man. But I mean, how they've treated, Brian Darcy, and you've already mentioned a number of people as well, Tony Flannery and the others. There are a bunch of them who did not deserve to be treated in the way they have been treated, who have been given no access to due process. But the truth of the matter is, the Curia, I look at the Curia now and I look back at all the documents that they have produced over the centuries. Boy, have they written millions and millions, and I mean millions of words, and they've had to eat most of them. So that's very encouraging.
Yeah, but they're
They're
never
completely
held,
useless.
But Mary, they're never held to account. They never say we got it wrong.
They take up positions and they write millions of words in support of those positions, and they tell the faithful, you must believe those positions. You must be obedient to those positions. And then over time, though the ridiculousness of some of those positions becomes evident, and they quietly, like little mice, reverse out of them. And nobody ever says, sorry, all those millions of words, we're really embarrassed by them now. They don't ever say that. They just quietly reverse out of them. I mean, one of the documents that I was just funny enough, during the week, I was talking to a friend who was a musician about church music. And we were talking about the document written, I think, about 1903, Tralle Solicitudine, a papal document, but obviously written by some member of the Curia, and saying that women couldn't sing in choirs. They're unsuitable to sing in choirs. They're not liturgically qualified enough to sing in choirs. And so if a church choir needs, the soprano voice or the contralto voice, well, that's when you use little boys with high-pitched voices, or brackets, though they don't say it, castrati. And you read this and you think, where's the document now that actually says, do you see that stuff that we wrote there? We're mortified by it. And we're now taking it back. But no, there it is. You go onto the Vatican website and there you'll still get it, Tralle Solicitudine. And in fairness, how did that all fall apart? Well, actually, thanks mainly, I think, to the American church at the time. They wrote and said, please, let women sing in the church. This is silly. It's embarrassing. And Tralle Solicitudine was designed to stop discussion about the matter. But you see, it didn't. And that's where our power really lies. We just keep talking about it. And not just talking among ourselves, though that is important to reinforce the power and gather the momentum. And then, to write to your nuncio, write to your bishop, write to your parish priest, and write to the Pope. That just to say, this is really unacceptable.
Well, Mary, when you called them an empire of misogyny in March earlier this year, did you get any feedback? Did you hear how they reacted to it?
Got a lot of feedback. Not from the Curia. Not from the Curia, it has to be said.
Did it go down well? You have inside sources out there.
Yeah, not very. And no, I had some lovely letters from what I might call unexpected quarters. I had some lovely supportive letters, but I would never dream, because they trusted me with their letters, so I won't dream of disclosing who they were. But I had some very encouraging letters.
And what were they saying?
I had a lot of posts, but from some clerics from whom I mightn't have expected them to. But that was lovely. But from the Curia, no. And as they're not even, I wrote to the Pope on the 31st of January, setting out my disquiet about being excluded by Cardinal Farrell from speaking at the Vatican, a conference which was to be merely located in the Vatican. And what may not be known is that I had known for several months that this was a problem, and I, along with the organisers, had tried in many ways to have the decision changed, because I felt that, well, first of all, I felt it was an insult to me personally, but I also thought that there were people in Ireland who might regard it as insulting and who might not take kindly to it, but people who were well disposed towards the church who would be embarrassed by it. At that time, I did not know that the decision had been taken by Cardinal Farrell, because the organisers took the view that they did not want to disclose that to me. They didn't want to, out of kind of a courtesy to me. So I did not know that until the week before I wrote to the Pope. Then it was disclosed to me in January that this had come from Cardinal Farrell, a Dubliner who, in fairness to him, did say to me on the one occasion that he met me that he really didn't know Ireland very well.
He was born in Drimna, wasn't he?
Pardon?
He's from Drimna.
He's a good Drimna man, yes. Yeah. But he spent, he was trained and formed by the Legionaries of Christ, which to me, is a very telling thing.
Why is that?
I regard them as quite cultic.
Cultic?
Quite cultic. I've never, and I have reason for saying that. I would have known quite a number of people who are in that organisation. When I was in Rome, I was approached by a young man, Irish-American, Legionary of Christ, who asked me for help, and it was hilarious. He came to see me through a friend of mine who's in the Legionaries, a good friend of mine, for whom I have a lot of time. This young man came to see me. He was running a place in Avoca Avenue, Blackrock, known to some people in this auditorium. And he wanted to know how could I help him to outreach to the people of Dublin and Ireland, because they weren't coming through the door. And I said, well, maybe the name the Legionaries of Christ is problematic because it's so closely associated with that awful criminal, Maciel, a rapist, a bigamist, a drug addict, and a money launderer who was a priest and the founder of the Legionaries. And I said, do you think that it could be that? And his answer to me was, oh, I didn't really understand Maciel, that Maciel was merely a Mexican. And I said, no, I appreciate that he was a Mexican, but he was also a Mexican criminal. And he said, well, no, I mean, what is misunderstood is that his behavior is really quite Mexican. I said, with the greatest respect. I actually was living in Rome in a lay center in which there happened to be 2 Mexicans. I said, I happen to live in a community with 2 Mexicans, and believe you me, they're nothing like Maciel. And they're also deeply embarrassed and worried by him and the impact he had and the influence that he wielded, particularly with Pope John Paul and the Vatican generally. Anyway, what was his problem? His problem was this. This young fellow's problem, this young priest's problem, was that people were not turning up to take advantage of their services. So what services did they offer? Well, one was that they helped young men and women, but particularly young boys who might think of themselves as gay. They helped to turn them into homosexuals, into heterosexuals. And I said to him, sort of scathingly, and could you do the opposite? I mean... And unfortunately, he didn't do irony, and so that kind of was a bit lost on him. The second thing I said, well, tell me what you do there, and he said, well, we run these courses for children, and I said, oh yeah, well, tell me about the courses for children. What kind of stuff do are you engaged with the children? And he said, well, one of the most important things we do is we teach them to recognize chasubles. And I said, sorry, what age group are we talking about here? He said, oh, we bring them in from about age 3. And I said, why would a 3-year-old want to be able to recognize a chasuble? I mean, I said, I was then about like 63, and I'm not sure that I would recognize a chasuble. And I said, well, why would you want them? Why would you want them to recognize a chasuble exactly? And he said, well, because you can't start their priestly formation young enough. I said, sorry, are we only talking about male children? And he said, yes. Well, that was the point at which I said, look, son, I felt I was entitled to call him son because he was, like about age 2. And I said, this conversation is not going to end as you thought. I said, I am now horrified at what you're doing in my city, the city that I love. And I said, I'm just going to have to take this conversation straight back to the person who authorized you to work in this diocese, and that's the Archbishop of Dublin. I'm going to have to complain about this, because either I complain to him or I'm going to complain to Ursula. I think what you're doing is abusive. I think what you're doing to young boys is abusive. I said, I've followed the coffins of young men who have gone through these bogus conversion therapies, thanks to a church that, regrettably, in fairness to Father James Martin, who's coming to the World Meeting of Families, I mean, he has said that too many bishops and priests support these ridiculous conversion therapies, and they cause untold damage to young people, untold damage. And I said that to this young man, and of course I did. I came straight back. This was 2012, just before the Eucharistic Congress, and I came straight back and I wrote a letter to the Archdiocese, and I got a response back which was, we're up to our necks in the Eucharistic Congress, let us get that over and then we'll deal with this. And I understand that they probably did deal with that. But that's what you're dealing with.